Right, before all of that, all this week, we're talking about the Labour Party launching a new initiative to tackle violence against women and girls. We're joined now by the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer. Good morning.
Good morning.
I can't imagine, it's a very important week. You're launching a campaign outlining your commitment to tackling violence against women, and then over the weekend you have a major distraction with Diane Abbott.
Yes, obviously that is regrettable on every level. What she said is to be thoroughly condemned. It was anti-Semitic, and it's very important that we acted quickly. But, you know, this is the week when we are talking about violence against women and girls and what we would want to do if we're privileged enough to come into government to tackle violence against women and girls.
She has issued a statement saying that she wished to wholly and unreservedly withdraw her remarks and disassociate herself from them. She added that the errors arose in an initial draft being sent. There is no excuse and I wish to apologise for any anguish caused. When you acted very quickly, actually, and this is something that I know that you've been very focused on when you came into the party, and she has been suspended, but there is a call to go further than that, that she should be expelled from the party. I imagine this is something you've been considering. Yeah,
I mean, look, one of the first things I said when I became leader of the Labour Party just over 3 years ago is that we would tear out anti-Semitism by its roots. And I meant what I said. And that's why, as soon as we saw what had been written by Diane Abbott, we had to take action. And I'm glad we took swift action. What now happens is there's a process, there's an investigation, obviously. Diane will say whatever she wants to say in response to that. And then there'll have to be an outcome, so we'll have to wait for that. But it was very important to me that we acted very, very quickly and made it clear that the Labour Party has changed and we will not tolerate that sort of language, that sort of statement, because it was anti-Semitic.
This was a major issue under Jeremy Corbyn. As you said, you were going to rip it out when you arrived, and here it is, you know, sort of face forward. So is there still an anti-Semitic problem within the party?
Well, obviously, what Diane Abbott said was anti-Semitic, so that's why we took the action that we did. We have done a lot in the last 3 years. I will admit that the fight against anti-Semitism is never over in any organisation, any political party, any society. I don't think anybody believes that you get to a point where you don't need to concern yourself anymore. What I asked of Jewish communities when I started as leader of the party was the space to show that I meant what I said. And they allowed me that space. And I think if you were to ask them, they would say we've made significant progress on this, and that the Labour Party now is unrecognisable from the Labour Party of 2019. But for that very reason, it was really important for me to act as quickly as we did on Sunday morning.
Is it frustrating for you that things like this come up and it pulls focus from the job in hand?
Yes, of course it is, because we've got local elections coming up. The stuff that we're doing on violence against women and girls is really important.
Yeah.
It's work I've been involved in for, 10, 15 years now. It matters to me as a person as well as to the Labour Party and I hope a Labour government. And I want that discussion to be had about what we do to combat violence against women and girls. 1 in 3 women and girls are subject to, abuse, harassment of some sort. It's a huge, huge issue. And we need to do much more. And what I'm trying to do this week is not just to say I don't think the government's done a very good job, I don't, but to say, well, what would you do then? What would an incoming Labour government do? I've worked on this when I was Director of Public Prosecutions and seen how hard it is for women and girls to come forward in the first place and simply describe what has happened to them, which is really, really tough, and then to go on the journey of criminal justice.
You had Emily Atack, Georgina Harrison yesterday. They were discussing their issues. Emily Atack made a documentary about it, has been very outspoken. So what will you do?
Yes, so we had a round table yesterday. Emily Atack was there, and Georgia Harrison was there, along with others, including Penny and John Clough, who lost their daughter Jane, who was raped and then murdered, a case which had a real impact on me when I was chief prosecutor. But what I think Emily and Georgia brought that was really important was this sense of these behaviours of abuse and harassment of women have been there for a very, very long time. We know that. But online provides a new way of perpetrating old behaviours. So, you know, Emily's subject to abuse online, Georgia, revenge porn. And it was a reminder to all of us that we've got to go further and faster in relation to the problems we know already exist. But also...
In what way? What will you do?
We've got to keep up. And I think one of the things that came up yesterday and what I'm launching today is spiking, where drinks are spiked of usually young women out and about. And the spiking of the drink has an effect on them and is often a step towards sexual assault of some sort. And that has never been a specific offence. And so what I'm saying today is an incoming Labour government would make it a specific offence. That will make it easier for people to come forward to report what's happened, easier to prosecute, but also raise awareness, I think, of what's going on.
This has been rejected by the government, saying that it was unnecessary.
I think they're wrong about that. There was a parliamentary committee looked at it and said we should have a specific offence because not many people are coming forward to say this has happened to them. This is always difficult to come forward to explain. An awful experience to people you don't know is always difficult, so we need to make that easier for people. It will make it easier to prosecute it. But I also want to draw attention to it. I want people to be talking about it and knowing about this, because for every young woman who goes out, this will strike real fear into them. And for parents. My daughter's 12, so not older, but I'm already worrying about what, you know, just in a few years, I can imagine myself sort of pacing the living room every time she's out, worried. And there'll be many parents in that situation, so draw attention to it and make sure we're up to date. I mean, Emily and George's challenge, if you like, to us yesterday was make sure that the law and the reaction of politicians is up to date in relation to the ways in which these days violence against women and girls is being perpetrated.
You have a daughter, I've got a daughter, I've got two sons as well, so I'm sort of now trying to parent both sides of this. And it's actually, you know, for me, I'm sort of I'm always with the boys, you know, right from the get-go, sort of talking about this very, very open conversation. And I know a lot of my friends, this is a real concern and worry for them. You've said that you're planning to teach respect to women and girls as part of the national curriculum. Some people say, well, this is a parent's job, but then there'll be those that aren't having those conversations.
I think it's everybody's job. Some parents are, some parents aren't. I do think we need to do more at school with boys and young men, because this can't be left to women and girls and victims of abuse and harassment to do the heavy lifting. It's got to be a boys and young men issue as well. I do, you know, I'm not going to set out a particular course, but I do think that we can bring about change. And just to give an example of what I mean, I honestly think that 10, 15, 20 years ago, young people wouldn't have talked about mental health in the way they do now. Young people are much more comfortable talking about mental health. True. And what I would like us to do is have that determination that we can change the discussion here. And young people having an appreciation. Violence against women and girls is just wrong, and young men understanding in a sort of almost muscle memory way that this is wrong.
You're not going to set out a specific course, but I think it's a specific course that people actually want to hear. You've talked about spiking and that becoming an issue, the general discussion about our behaviour towards each other. What you haven't addressed is the major toxic cesspit that is social media. And Emily Atack has been very clear that she is still getting abused on social media. What sort of restrictions, what sort of regulations will you place on those platforms?
I think the big change we need to see is responsibility on the platform providers for the content. You know, as Emily Atack said yesterday, you can't expect those that are subject to this to do all of the hard work here. It's got to be the platform providers. And so I do think there's a chance, there's some legislation that we might be able to amend as it goes through Parliament. There's a chance to change the balance of power here. I mean, this is only the latest form. I mean, violence against women and girls is pernicious. And I, you know, saw for myself when I was Chief Prosecutor just how hard it is for women and girls to have the confidence to come forward to share probably the worst experience in their lives with strangers. This is a hard... I mean, the more you just think through how hard this is, you appreciate why we need to change, why we need to provide a supportive environment which people can come forward, and a journey through criminal justice, if that is what it is, that actually works for the victim or survivor. I mean, for many years, we've sort of seen criminal justice as a sort of clash of the prosecutor versus the defendant, the person in the dock, with the victim having a sort of walk-on part. I think we've got to change that profoundly.
Change the narrative. I hope it happens, and I hope it happens quickly. While you're here, we wanted to talk to you about some other issues as well. So the strikes, obviously, earlier this month, the Royal College of Nursing rejected the offer of a 5% pay rise. Just wondered your thoughts on that, whether you agreed with them rejecting that, and also this idea that Rishi Sunak has said that he will take legal action against them because of it.
I think the government's got this completely wrong. Everybody needs to get in the room, and we need to sort this out. Nobody wants strikes. I think of the patients who've got their operations being cancelled. Everybody anxious about whether they're going to need to go to a hospital. Nurses don't want to be on strike. My wife works in the NHS. My mum was a nurse. My sister was a nurse. So this is deep in my DNA. Nobody wants to be on strike. But, you know, at the very beginning of this, way back before Christmas, the Royal College of Nursing said to the government, if you come in the room with us now to talk about pay, we won't even go on strike. And the government sat on its hands for weeks and weeks and weeks.
What would you
and
pay?
Created conditions in which it was hard to find an agreement.
What will you pay them? If you were in government now, what would you pay them?
We would get around the table and come to some sort of compromise.
What would you pay them?
I'm not going to...
Why?
There isn't... Because a compromise, by its nature, is two sides going into a room and coming up with an agreement.
But what's a reasonable agreement?
Look,
what are they worth?
I understand completely why nurses feel the way they do, because... as you know, as everybody watching knows, their pay hasn't gone up in material terms for a very, very long time now. They've worked really hard through the pandemic. So get in the room, compromise with them. It is possible to reach agreements. It happens all of the time. When Labour were last in power, we didn't have a national nurses' strike, and we had very high levels of satisfaction with the NHS. That's the sort of approach that I would want to bring. I would also modernise the NHS, by the way, because I do think we need to change as we go forward, because we're all living longer and we need access to health and mental health closer in our communities. I think many people would say, look, this journey that we all know of being either in the doctor's surgery or in A&E, there has to be another place where we can get the care that we need.
And future-proofing it also, because you were talking about educating, putting money into that so that there are more medical staff available, whether that's doctors or nurses or anybody.
Yeah, I would like to double the number of medical students coming through, doctors, nurses...
I can almost hear people saying, how are you going to pay for it? But you do have a plan for that.
We do have a plan. So we would get rid of the non-dom status. That's this tax status that allows the super-rich not to pay their tax in this country. We think they should pay their tax in this country.
So these people, just to explain what that is, because you hear that and you go, I don't quite understand what that actually means, but it's people who are living abroad.
Well, living here very often, but registered, as it were, abroad to pay their tax. So although they're here, they're paying their tax to a different country. If we changed that and said, no, I'm afraid, you know, if you live here, you're resident here, you've got to pay your tax.
Is that companies as well? Is that Amazon as well?
Well, I think there are things that we need to look at with Amazon, but for this purpose, for what would be the biggest workforce expansion of the NHS in its history, that would be by getting rid of the non-dom tax status. And I think that most people watching would say, look, if the choice is this loophole for super-rich to continue to not pay their tax here, or doubling the number of doctors and nurses coming in. And most people would say, I know what I would do straight away. And for the first time, I mean, people are always worried about having to go to hospital, calling an ambulance, getting a GP's appointment now is very difficult. But the number of people now who are worried about even the future of the NHS is really striking. This has never been an issue for debate. And I think it gives you a sense of just how broken the NHS is now after 13 years of this government.
You talk about the local elections coming up, not that far away from a general election. You have had your campaign seriously criticising Rishi Sunak for various failings during his leadership. Brutal in some respects, some would say. David Blunkett, a highly respected former Labour Home Secretary, said he had been left close to despair by what he described as a deeply offensive advert and gutter politics.
Look, I don't make any apologies for the way we've run our campaign. When I think of our campaign, I think of all the people who have been very badly let down in the last 13 years. And I'm afraid whatever the government says, people are really worried about crime. They're worried about going out in their own streets.
Is that the right way to do it, though? If David Blunkett, as I said, massively respected, if he says that, surely maybe you would think this perhaps isn't the right way to attack.
Well, look, I agree with David on many things and talked to David and he did a really brilliant piece of work for us on skills. I disagree with him on this one. I think that it is quite right for us to attack the government hard on their record in government because there's a sense that everything is now broken. And whenever I ask people, I say, well, look, do you feel better off after 13 years of this government? Do you think our health service is better? Do you think the economy is working better over the last 13 years? There's only one answer to those questions, and I think it's right that that be called out. I also think that this idea that you can change the Prime Minister, we've had 5 now in the 13 years, and that as each one is sort of slotted in, they bear no responsibility for the 13 years. That's just wrong. It's a 13-year record.
The point is that it's been said over a number of times, you know, the bear baiting in Parliament, all of that, and it is a rough and tumble, but occasionally it gets massively personal, and people have said in the past, we have to calm this down, and show respect and you can't be kind in politics, but however, that personal gutter attacks aren't the right way to go because it just isn't showing a great example about all of the other things that we've discussed this morning.
I think we have to be tough in our criticism, and that's what we're being in those attack ads. And so I stand by them and I don't apologise for them. I do think it's good that we're having a debate about the record of this government over 13 years because for many people there's a yearning now for change and that opportunity, and it is an opportunity, to build a better Britain.
Something that I think is worrying for an awful lot of people is the migration. People are concerned about the small boats, poor people sort of desperately taking their lives into their own hands, crossing the channel. The average wait list for asylum to be processed in the UK was 15.5 months, and there's created this huge backlog, 166,000 people all waiting. Yeah. I know that the Prime Minister has pledged to clear most of this by the end of 2023. Whether or not he does is yet to be seen. What do you do? What's the answer to this?
Well, my starting position is nobody should be making that journey.
Yeah.
We do have to stop the boats. Nobody should be making that journey across the channel. I think, you know, there are a number of things that could be done. I think the two that I would focus on with a laser-like focus if we were in government, one, break the criminal gangs that are driving this. There are criminal gangs making a huge amount of money out of this. And you can operate cross-border and upstream to break those gangs. So when I was Director of Public Prosecutions, we did have cross-border work being done to deal with drugs, to deal with guns. We should have the same determination when it comes to people smuggling. The second thing is the very point you make, which is the processing of the claims. I think that many people would be pretty shocked to learn that of all the people that arrived by small boat in the last 12 months or so, 1% have had their claims processed. That's shocking. I mean, that's a broken system. And I think that, you know, it's all very well the government putting up gimmick after gimmick. Get on with the obvious, which is process these claims properly, because it's getting worse, not better.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.